Soldiers of Reddit who have faced child soldiers in combat, what has been your, or your comrades, experience? Any unique challenges you or others have faced? My ex was British Royal Marines and fought child soldiers. This was 10 plus years before I met him. But he had horrible nightmares and on a couple of occasions broke down crying while drunk. He never told me everything in a coherent, start to finish way, but from what I've pieced together he killed one or more child soldiers protecting his unit. It catapulted him into self-loathing. He got awarded a medal for it, refused to accept it, but was forced to attend the ceremony with members of the royal family. Only got through it by drinking himself into a stupor and then spent the next 4 to 5 years with a serious coke habit before being able to transition into more moderate alcoholism. So yay. My buddy said that kids would often run up to the convoy trucks in Iraq and some of the guys would give them candy, even though they weren't supposed to. On one such occasion, a kid tossed 2 live grenades into the truck. One of the grenades was quickly tossed away to explode without issue. The other was not as easy to get rid of and ended up amongst the group of kids. The guys giving out candy were put on cleanup duty. No idea what the approximate age of the children was and not many other details. It was pretty rare to get him drunk enough and in a mood to talk about any of it. Sorry, I for some reason cannot flare this post as serious. If it is not evident by the touchy nature of the posed question. No, I would prefer serious and respectful discussion. My platoon sergeant was on his 3rd tour when he joined our unit heading to the sandbox. I'll probably never forget the time he just dropped in casual conversation, in a joking manner. You can take home a lot of things from your time in service, but I'd rather not have been the first guy in my neighborhood with 3 confirmed kills. And he just kept talking from there like he didn't want to give anyone else a chance to question what he just said. It worked. I never asked. End of our tour. Nothing really happened the whole time. He got comfortable enough with us to tell some stories from his past tours. One of them involved meeting a 13-year-old Iraqi boy awkwardly trying to carry an RPG in the suburbs of Baghdad, and the sergeant just up and running at the kid, screaming at the top of his lungs, firing his weapon as fast as he could in the air, scaring the kid enough for him to drop the RPG and run. I never saw his file to see if he had a bronze or silver star, but I think he earned something that day. Kid was likely just being used as a mule to bring gear and ammo to insurgents, so he wasn't likely a threat himself, but he could have been shot for carrying a weapon by someone too quick on the trigger. Sergeant intervened, but chasing someone through the streets is likely to get you isolated and shot, so he had no idea what happened to the kid. I can't speak for others, and thankfully I never had to pull the trigger, but I always gave them a lot more time in the crosshers versus an adult. There were several times they ran up unexpectedly, waved a gun in our direction, or just generally acted like they were going to attack us. I'd put them in my sights and beg God, please don't make me do this. Thankfully, every time, they'd stop what they were doing. If it were an adult aiming a weapon at us, they'd get zero thought. I remember the ones I didn't pull the trigger on so much more than the ones that I did. I'm sure a lot of soldiers would disagree with me, but I sleep just fine at night. Not me, but a fraternity brother and close friend who passed away told me a story once about his 2nd deployment in the Middle East. He was an Army Ranger, Army Special Ops, and was a breacher, first one enduring all breaches because he had balls of steel and insane reflexes. He told me that he killed a kid once who couldn't have been more than 14 years old. He said the action wasn't what haunted him. He said it was how it happened. He was leading the team through an alleyway to a door that led to a suspected illegal weapons cache, and he held his breaching shotgun up to the door and gave count. And as soon as he was about to breach, the door swung open and a kid leaned out through the door with an AK-47 pointed outward. So he blasted the kid in the face with the breacher shotgun, and he said the look of surprise on the kid's face was what bothered him. A mix of surprise and inevitability of his doom. There's no running from a ducking shotgun blast to the face. There was a kid sitting on an overpass in Iraq, dropping Molotov cocktails trying to make it into the gunner's hatch of all the MRAPs in our convoy. .50 cal gunner saw him and cut him in half. He was probably 10 years old or so. I knew a guy who served and we got drunk one night and I was the idiot who asked, What's the worst thing you saw while serving over there? He got quiet and got this far away look in his eyes, and then he told me this story. I was in an armored convoy and we were in the middle of a patrol, but it had been a pretty normal day. The school buses that we used were pretty much just minivans, so the only way to identify it was a school bus was usually the sticker they placed on the side. Anyways, the area we were in was known for placing copper on top of their bombs, because when a bomb ignites, the copper liquefies and basically goes through anything. Even our tanks can't block that hit. So we're on patrol and a bomb goes off about 10 feet to our right, and I figured I was a dead man. Right then a school bus drove by and provided cover from the blast, so only one of our soldiers was hurt, but not seriously. However, that school bus was blown to hell. Most of the kids died, but the worst part was the driver of the school bus survived, who was a middle-aged woman. But her legs and arms had been blown away from the blast, so we had to drive her to the nearest hospital. I'll never forget her screams, especially because she had to sit under my legs since we had no room. She screamed and screamed, but mostly I won't forget the arms and legs of the children that had been destroyed from that blast. It will haunt me forever. I was deployed in Afghanistan from 2009 to 2010 and again in 2012 with the US Army. Due to the nature of my deployments, the first one was much more kinetic, and that's where most of my personal encounters with the enemy happened. A lot of the people we fought were teenagers, probably from 16-19 years old, so some of them were children by the US definition. But over there people grow up a lot faster. Everyone I dealt with was trying to kill me, so I don't feel any remorse about shooting back at them or dropping mortar rounds on them. I never had to deal with younger kids being a threat or anything like that, thankfully. And honestly, myself and everyone I knew generally really liked the little kids over there. They were usually sweet and nice, and always asked for candy and gum and stuff like that. And even when those littlets would throw rocks at our trucks, it was hard to blame them. Not much else to do for fun around there. I wouldn't say it was unique, because every day in itself was always something new, and the child may not have been a soldier. I was the medic riding in the back right seat of a Humvee back in 09. I saw a child about 10 plus minus 2 years of age from the back seat of his parents' Mercedes, which was at my 3 o'clock. Pointed 9mm at my gunner, whose fire sector was to my 9 o'clock. I immediately opened my window and aimed my M4 and let the convoy know what I'm seeing. Gunner's turn and a shot came from the Humvee in front of me and hits the car. No one was hurt. The reason I didn't fire is because I could see that he didn't have the instinct to pull the trigger. Had he been several years older and carried himself more like he knew what he was doing, then I'm positive I would have been the one to fire, and it wouldn't have been the car that would have been hit. Didn't actually pull the trigger on the kid, but was ready to. Convoy through a village and the kid reaches into a pocket and pulls out what looks like a grenade and tries to throw it. I hesitated. The grenade slipped out of his hand behind him. It was damn rock. I was ready to kill a kid over a ducking rock. If it was a grenade and he managed to throw it, my hesitation could have meant my buddies' lives. I'm glad it was rock. If you've never been in combat, it's hard to explain to people how frenetic and chaotic combat can be. You don't get a red pip that highlights where the enemy is. You don't have a radar. You don't get a notification that your shot hit its target. You hear bullets WHHRT past you, smack into something near you, ground, wall, trees, vehicles, etc. And you get behind cover. You then start yelling to your squad mates about where you collectively think the incoming fire is coming from. Sometimes it's obvious, but usually it's not. You're even more ducked if you're in an urban, semi-urban setting where there are non-combatant civilians running around. Worse still, when you simply can't tell the difference between the two. You're trying to not die. You're trying to leave cover, acquire a target, shoot that target, and then get back behind cover before someone sees you and shoots you. This does not leave a whole lot of time for pondering how old your target is, what their motivations are, or how long they've been a soldier. Mix this in with the kids who would run around trying to pick up brass in the middle of a firefight, and it's just a hot, chaotic mess. I didn't want to die, so I shot back. Most people who have been in combat will tell you something similar. I was with the SADF back in Angola. My platoon and I had few brushes with the MPLA. We mostly met poorly trained militias armed with old Soviet gear. But I remember on one occasion, we were entering a village where we were supposed to get water. The village, if we can even call it that, had around 10-15 actual house, and of those at least half were abandoned. I remember that our spotter yelled out to us, telling us to get prepared. Our lieutenant saw something that visibly shocked him and called out our sergeant. We received the order to issue warning shots south of our position. That's when we all saw it. Around 30-40 kids with guns bigger than them, with a few adults who seemed to be their COS. Our sergeant ordered us to target the officers. And we did. Even after all 6 of their adults were clear, the kids still continued to shoot, with no control of their fire. After maybe 5 minutes the order came, fire at will. I don't remember if the entire platoon opened fire. I remember I did. In the moment, I didn't quite think about who I was shooting. I don't think anyone did. All we saw was an enemy eager to send us home in body bags. We saw enemy uniforms. Nothing else. Nobody said anything afterwards. My comrades probably all willingly forgot this or justified it by saying something like "I saw them." It's very easy to analyze the situation if you weren't there, but when you're in the moment, you forget that the ones on the other side are just like you. So to sum it all up, I opened fire without thinking too hard about it. Don't know if I regret it. I just know I don't like remembering. Recovering from the addiction after self-medicating on liquor for 6 months after my deployment. Not me, but my uncle. He was one of the unfortunate ones to make it back from Vietnam, but leave their mind behind. Him and a buddy went for a drink shortly before they were supposed to come back. A kid ran up to them in the street with a shoebox asking if they wanted to buy something. My uncle just brushed past the kid and kept walking, but his buddy tried humoring the kid. When the kid opened the box, an explosive inside went off and killed his buddy and the kid. When we were little, this was 20 years after he came back, we weren't allowed to have boxes when we were at his house. We couldn't run around near the house or be loud, have toy guns, G.I. Joe figures, wear camouflage or nothing when we'd visit. He was real uneasy about children even after that long. That wasn't the only recurring side effect he had, but the only one dealing with children. I just wanna say this, not my thread, but thank you so much for everyone who responded. Seriously, I'm sure it has not been easy to write out, but it was all very enlightening. My brother was in Iraq during early mid 2000s when things were really whack. Said he was on gate duty one night and a kid walked up with an MRE trying to get him and his buddies to come up to the gate. Obviously none of them got up because they had MREs of their own, but long story short, the kid blew up from an IED they had put in the MRE bag the kid was holding. He had a couple other stories, but the he saw was enough to make a hardcore atheist find Jesus, so IDK. We don't talk much now, but if you're reading this, I love you, man. Not a soldier, but my stepdad was a paratrooper in the special forces. It took me several years to get him to tell me anything about the combat he had seen during the Gulf War. His first kill was a child around the age of 8. Stepdad was in the back of a convoy holding rear position. They stopped for some reason I never asked, and the child came running at them from behind. He was naked except a thick vest and had a grenade in his hand. Stepdad told him to stop over 10 times. The boy's father was watching from a nearby building. Still messes him up and he goes to therapy 3 times a week. War is hell. Not really the same thing, but this question reminded me of something I read in Stars and Stripes while I was deployed. Some army unit was doing daily patrols through some whole town I can't remember the name of. They did this patrol every day and the locals got to know them pretty well and didn't seem to mind. And the kids in town would run alongside the convoy and beg for candy. A bunch of soldiers started tossing them stuff from their MREs. It was a hearts and minds type thing, I guess. Anyway, one day while on this routine patrol, an IED ripped through the convoy while it was stopped and a bunch of kids were gathered around. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think like maybe 4 soldiers were either killed or wounded and something like 20 or more kids were killed. I know it was a pretty high number, and the first thing I thought was, goddamn, this village just lost like 20% of the kids that live there. I wasn't on this convoy and I don't know anyone who was, but I had been on the same sort of mission dozens of times and could easily place myself there. I saw kids get killed by insurgents and allies, but I never saw a mass casualty situation involving little kids like this. The big thing was turning off the mental switch. It was seeing it as a threat and stopping it if they put us in their sights, or in some cases wore suicide vests without attempting surrender. It was a lot of, if this doesn't get done, me or someone I know isn't going home alive. We had a kid, maybe 8-10 years old, walk by one of our vehicles with a woman. As soon as he was alongside of the truck, he took out a grenade and tried to throw it on top of the truck. Mind you, these trucks are about 9 feet tall. Grenade bounced off the armor and back at the kid. Killed him and the woman. I wanted to feel sorry for him, but I really can't. I'm sure an adult told him to do it, but that could have killed me or one of my brothers. When I was in Iraq, a man was carrying who I believed to be his daughter on his shoulders when it became quickly apparent he had on a suicide vest. He didn't think we'd shoot. I don't think anyone aimed for the girl. Why would they? Didn't stop him from detonating. With the exception of his torso, he all but evaporated. The little girl shot straight up in the air. The lower half completely gone. Not my favorite memory. War sucks. My guess is she was 4-5. Considering some of the it in this thread, I'll try to keep mine a little more lighthearted. Kids used to throw rocks at our MATVs as we were driving through a village. They'd always aim for the gunner and even hit him a couple of times. Eventually he started carrying a wrist rocket slingshot and a bag of Jolly Ranchers. On one particular occasion some kid came pretty close with a rock, so he loaded up his slingshot and drilled him right between the eyes with a Jolly Rancher. The other children saw it on the ground and dogpiled to try and get the candy. Still one of the funniest things I've heard. Marine friend of mine told me a story about clearing buildings in Iraq. A member of his squad team whatever entered a room that contained a family, including parents and a 16-ish-year-old kid. The kid grabbed a barrel of the guy's gun, which caused him to pull back on the rifle to try to break the hold. Unfortunately, he accidentally pulled the trigger as well, killing the kid right in front of his parents. The rest of the platoon nicknamed him Slaughter after that. Full stop. Sorry for mistakes. English is not my first language. A guy I know once told me that when he was in Iraq on an observation mission, he saw some terrorists align 10 kids, aged 10 to 16, through the scope of his precision rifle. Then one of the terrorists cut the throats of all the kids one after the others. He said that this was one of the most horrible thing he saw. He saw a lot of things. Then a few days later, in a banal checkpoint, he recognized the man who killed the kids. He was in a car with his wife and his own kids. So my friend threw a grenade in the car and killed them all. He was 19 at the moment, and because he was still in state of shock from what he has previously seen, he wasn't charged, but the man who placed him on the observatory mission was, because he wasn't supposed to send the rookie on this mission. He told me that he didn't regret it that much because he felt like the kids would have died anyway, and probably in a more painful way. He thinks that the kids were manipulated and that there is no hopes for them to get out of the terrorism way of thinking. A buddy loaded his saw. 2 rounds, then a tracer round. He would shoot over their heads and hope it was enough to scare the kid away. My stepdad was in Vietnam and he had horrible PTSD. He would cry and say he didn't want the VA money. We had him apply for disability when he couldn't work for being wasted. He said it was blood money. He admitted he killed women, children and old people. He said he was scared and following orders. He told me some horrible stories when he was drunk. I wish I could forget them all. He was a good man, but his demons got him in the end. He died in 2006. We had a child throw a grenade at a squad of soldiers and wounded a couple guys. From what I heard, they saw the kid just before and then running after the grenade was thrown. An adult man would have never been able to get that close. But if you look at it as an Islamist, you can't lose in that scenario. Say the kid had been shot, by whatever side, you can get a photograph and say, well, look what the Americans did. Also, you don't carry any personal guilt because that child has been martyred to eternal paradise and it was Allah's will. Lastly, from a military perspective, maybe one of your 12-year-old little duck boys just got killed. Yes, that is thing over there. But you didn't just lose one of your best jihadists trying to sneak up on the Americans. The cost benefit is undeniable. One expendable child appearing unarmed was able to casually get close and wound multiple US soldiers. Had a 14-15-year-old run toward our unit with an AK in hand. Laid down fire without thinking. Still see his face to this day. It sucks. But at the end of the day, either he's going home, or I am. So I'm typing this and he isn't. It's life. Not a veteran or a soldier, but back home in Iraq when I was a kid, A group of American soldiers knocked down our door and raided our house. I was only 9, with 2 younger brothers, 6 and 2. My mom tells me to take my brothers and go hide. We hid in the closet. All we could hear was screaming and things being thrown and broken. I was really scared, but things got even scarier when I heard a gunshot. I told my brothers to stay in the closet. I left and slowly went downstairs. I looked around the corner of the stairs and all I saw was my mom laying there and my dad on his knees, and they were surrounded by a group of soldiers. I saw that and lost it. I went downstairs and tried to fight them off. Very stupid. I got punched in the face and then they left. My mom was shot in the abdomen. We rushed her to a hospital and luckily she lived. That was one of the stories that traumatized me. Other being is that we would see tanks pass our house every couple of days. The most terrifying one was when they shot up my school. I left safely but most kids didn't survive. It was terrifying going back to school after a month and half of the people I knew were killed. No one talks about how it's like from our point of view. It's scary and traumatic. Now I'm 16. And we moved to the US in 2013 and just got my citizenship last month and my passport is currently being processed. But those memories will never leave my mind and will continue to haunt me and a lot of other kids. It's deeply disturbing how many people have stories to tell here. And then they tell you to stop itching about student loans and just join the military if you want free education. Ducking hell, nothing is worth going through this emo. Taliban like to use kids to spot for mortars and snipers. They know we don't like shooting kids, so they'd just blatantly stand there with a radio or cell phone directing fire at you right in the open. Evil, and I mean seriously. Antichrist demon child evil, grins on fire faces. The Taliban also like to do stuff like bury weapons or IEDs with a kid or 2 within arm's reach. They knew we were watching, either from concealment or with drones or aircraft. They knew we'd be much less likely to fire if kids and women were present. I never shot one. I just walk or run up, take the comm device away, and itch slap them hard enough to put them on fire ass. Frankly, I was lucky my ass never got hit, but after a while in the sandbox you actually start treating incoming fire about as casually as most people treat a surprise rain shower. I once bent one over my knee and literally gave him a spanking with my belt after I realized he was the lookout for an IED burying team. They'd suddenly turn back into kids and run away crying for mommy. The worst injury I ever received was from a kid though. I was in an Afghan police compound after a patrol and took my helmet off. Some kid, probably 9 or 10, climbed up the wall. I stood up to yell at him to duck off, and that's the last thing I remember for 2 days. Ducker dropped a cinder block on my head as I was standing up. My platoon was patrolling the Suck area in Ramadi in 2005 and popped around a corner to see 3 bad guys with AK-47s and masks filming some kind of video near their car. There was also a teenager, about 16-17 years old, Homer, who was with them. But he didn't have a weapons on him. I was second man in the patrol. My team leader popped the corner. A split second before I did, he screamed stop and started shooting when the men turned around. The 3 men were about 150 yards away and instantly peeled into the car and floored it. At that point both me and my team leader engaged the vehicle, dumping a combined 25-30 rounds into it as it sped away. The car turned a corner and got away. No idea if we killed any occupants, but we ducked up the windows and rear of the car. The teenage boy didn't climb into the car and so he sprinted across the street towards the main Suck area. I picked him up instantly with my ACAG scope and tracked him. I lead him a half step. There was just no way to miss the shot. In end I couldn't do it. He was technically a bad guy, but he wasn't armed and he was basically a terrified kid when I got the drop on him. He disappeared into the Suck and we boogied over looking for the vehicle. We never found it, so we ended up getting extracted by QRF. Somewhere in Iraq there's a lucky as it 30-year-old man. I don't know if this counts, but I heard a story where a guy was leading a convoy of army trucks and there was a group of little kids playing in the street. He radioed his commander and asked if he should stop. The commander said no and that the insurgents use kids to stop a convoy so they can come out from hiding and attack them. So that he just keeps driving along and runs over the kids, and he said he could hear the crunches and screams of them. I don't know if this is real or not, and even if it isn't, just the thought of having to do that and live with that would scar me for life. I have a buddy who, before he switched to the military branch I'm in, has been to Afghanistan. His squad leader there told him he had once been in a very heavy battle during the beginning of the war. There were these children following his unit armed with only communication equipment. They would keep giving away their locations, making them unable to escape and receive heavy contact wherever they went. The squad leader made the decision and ordered to kill the children to save his men. They did not get any charges. I believe it was because using communication equipment like that can be seen as weapon usage. I'm not too sure about the last part though. It was something along the lines of that. Look, I shot a kid that was younger than my son. This thread is over 10 hours old, so I don't expect a lot of feedback, but they ducked me up. I still have trouble sleeping or being okay in general. 10 years later, my kid knows and sympathizes. I didn't pull the trigger, but I felt responsible for the death of a child. I was a weather forecaster attached to the 101st at Bagram. I worked the night shift. I was working the night when it got overrun. That ended up being a 29-hour shift. We had a 9-line come down requesting medevac. I analyzed conditions and there were low ceilings and bad visibility en route. So I briefed no-go to the battle captain. A 9-line is an immediate report sent out with bare bones information initially. Then more details come later. The initial call was for an injured local national. Later I found out that it was a 6-year-old girl with 3rd-degree burns over 85% of her body. By grounding or medevac. I killed her. I know I made the right call to not risk our dust-off team, but I still struggle with it. It's been 10 years.